Good evening. This is Dr. Thomas Klein coming to you from Raleigh, North Carolina. My trusty 12-year-old grandson, who is producer and cameraman for these productions, has decided he'd rather go to middle school than come and work for me. So he said, "Grand-père, you can do these yourself." So I've switched over to my cell phone, and it's right up there. And I have a little timer to keep me under 10 minutes. And I have a little button turns the thing on and off. So I can have my own studio now. So let me, give me some feedback on these. I have bought a $400 Panasonic camera we were using before. And maybe we don't need to do that. You know, we can just use my cell phone. So today, we want to talk about my friend Socrates and the concepts that are coming out of the PROP group, the Physicians for Responsible Opioid Prescribing, that say if you have tolerance, that we talked about before, and you have dependence, that these things are part of opiate addiction. Therefore, if you have dependence and tolerance, you're probably addicted. Well, that kind of goes back to the problem of the rooster crowing before the sun rises, making the sun rise. This is called propter hoc ergo propter hoc, which means if something comes first, it doesn't necessarily mean the thing that follows is related. So when you have that kind of rooster thinking, you have a problem. Roosters do not make the sun come up. Does tolerance and dependence cause addiction? Just because addicted people have tolerance and dependence on the pills? Well, we'll leave that for you to decide, but this proposition is good for things in life too. Just because something comes first and is followed by something else doesn't mean it's causal. You all learned in school, I'm sure, correlation is not causality. But if you have something that's causal, it is correlated. But you can't turn it around and go the wrong way down the street. So let's look at these statements. There are more opiate prescriptions written. There are more overdose deaths. See, prescription written first follows the following statement, like the sun rises. So do more prescriptions cause more overdose deaths? Well, you have to stop and say, wait a minute, we're going to need to use some rules in logic. And so if you make that relationship, that co-relationship, you have to prove that it's causal. And that's what you do with logic, or you do it with an experiment. Does all the other factors, let's say child abuse, cause more addiction? Okay, that's because people who are addicted to the other substances, not opiates, have, if you ask them, they say, oh yes, I had a history of child abuse. Okay, now here's how you prove that. Those two things are not necessarily causal until you prove it. What you do is you go find 1,000 people with a history of abuse. And then you follow them and you see if they become addicted. And if a higher percentage of that group becomes addicted, you've got it. You made your point. You've proved it. But that is never done. You know why? It's too expensive. You got to follow people for 10 years, to see if they become addicts. So this is a real serious issue. Because something precedes something else does not mean it's causal. If lightning strikes down the road and all of a sudden your cat keels over dead, you say, whoa, my cat keeled over dead because of what happened just before. So it may be true, it may not be true. What you have to do is do a little study and go around and ask people, say, did your cat die after thunder? There's also an over-reliance on group studies. For example, we see a lot of group studies claiming at the CDC that higher doses cause more deaths. And when we looked at those carefully, we found out the studies were flawed. So, but if the studies were correct, then you'd have a stronger argument. When the FDA looked at high doses, they really did not come up with anything. Lately, they've been tacking it on because they think it's related. So you need to also ask questions. You need to be kind of probing and sort of irritating. So let's say that you have an increase in your overdoses that year, and come to find out the overdose deaths have been increasing in the United States since 1970, not 1999, not since the founding of OxyContin. Since 1970, every year there are more and more overdoses. Why? Don't know. So if you want to make hypotheses and assumptions, the next step is to prove them, not just say them and incorporate them into the CDC guidelines and have them become policy that wreck people's lives because the doctors don't want to treat people because they're liable to become tolerant and dependent, end up addicted. Dr. Kolodny, the head of the group called Physicians for Responsible Opioid Prescribing, said in the J&J trial under oath that 25% of pain patients, not addicts, pain patients, were addicted. Actually, none are addicted after they get through the first month, because during that first month is when people do become addicted to opiates. How do we know that? We know that by talking to people. Is this a study we did? No. This is direct inquiry, which is part of science. It's like looking through a telescope. That's not a study. That's looking through a telescope. It's gathering information. So we at the National Pain Council ask our members, all of whom have rare painful diseases, various questions. And we ask them, do you think the opiate pain medicines relieve your pain and increase your function? 90% of them said yes. Then people say, oh no, they're just going to all say yes, because they're all half addicted anyway. No. We asked a question about the effectiveness of buprenorphine on pain. Only 50 or 60% said it actually worked. So we know that these polls that we do are pretty valid, and we stand behind them. So basically, be cautious when you read something is related, involved with, and then they don't give any proof. So that's all the time we have for today. And I'm going to see what I can get out of these poppy flowers. Even the non-opioid poppy, which this is, there's a little trace of the opium in the seeds. Back in the days before the pyramids were built, that's how they treated pain, is the seeds of the poppy plant. They just gave a certain number of seeds. Worked instantly, like it does now. And it is still the only medication for severe pain FDA approves, and it's the only medication that works. So we'll click the little button, and I'll see you next time.